done, but
Well, we can kick it off. So I'm gonna make everyone big here. Haywood, you're gonna go on Spotlight, and we're gonna go here. We're gonna go Spotlight.
I did. I'm not sure how that's just for the climb, but I mean we're at 250, limited
All right.
turbulence,
People
I guess
could
above that.
if
So we're
people
not
could
going to go
mute, they were
super high.
not on not
That was our cruise altitude is 25.
yeah, I think we got a pilot talking in the
Oh,
background. That
I'm
was about
sorry
to
about
take
that.
off. That's all right.
I'm
That's nice to
sorry.
know. That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
We like pilots are
How are we
accepted
getting that?
pilots are accepted part of the team. Well, I'll admit people as they go, but Haywood, and everyone that thanks for joining. Tonight, I think Uncle Hank's going to join us in a little bit. He's probably caught in a boatyard somewhere. But what we wanted to do tonight is kind of go from and I know you're for those of you who don't know, this is Haywood here on I guess my left, and there's Dad and I here. And Haywood was a really big part of the inspiration of the picnic boat. I know you were working with Shep on this project a lot, and Dad, and you were over at Bass Harbor Marine where they did a lot of the early preliminary testing. Certainly, I know that the one with the inboard outboard was tested over there and stuff, et cetera. So if you want to kick it off, Haywood, about the timeline and kind of where you remember this whole thing, the gestation of it all. I think most people that are listening know that if you really want to trace the roots of the Hinckley Company, the first boat that Grandpa built, was that lobster boat for Les Morrill, who was still alive when I was a kid and lived right up the street from us. Mm-hmm. And he actually used it in the summer as a picnic boat, and taking, the summer people around, right?
Right.
And then Bunker and Ellis down the road started building, they kind of claimed, and some people say, started building these commercial vessels as pleasure boats. So the history goes back to the 20s, 30s. But then let's hand it over to you, Haywood, and give us kind of your rundown of the manifestation of this. It was a real, I guess, game changer for the industry, this boat.
It certainly was for the Hinckley Company. And I'd love to say that, Bob and Shep just came up with the idea and charged the rest of us with making it happen. But, the picnic boat, the way it came out was a little bit accidental in that you were right, Barry, that there was the boats that Hinckley built, and then the ones that probably made it the most famous were the Bunker and Ellis. There was a guy in there named Chester Clements who worked, I think, first for Southwest Boat and then maybe later on that built some of the early boats that were right before the Bunker and Ellis boats, and built a couple of very beautiful boats that had the right look. But the picnic boat originally started out as a crazy idea that Shep McKinney proposed, that we just build a boat that he and Bob and I could use in the summer. And it would look kind of like maybe a Bunker and Ellis, but it had to be beautiful. But the real idea was it would just be fun, and that it was probably, at that time, we were talking about having Bass Harbor Marine build it, and maybe we'd build because we didn't really build boats. We were just a service part of, Bob and Shep owned most of Bass Harbor Marine, and we did almost all service work, but we really didn't build boats. So we kicked around that idea, and we went and looked.
What year was this, Haywood?
I would say it's 92 or 93, maybe, probably 92.
I think it was 92, because I remember when I was in Newport working for you at Bass Harbor Marine Hinckley office, you and Shep came down and you were testing out. You asked me to come meet you in Westport, Mass, where you met a fisherman, a commercial fisherman that was using one of the early Hamilton jet drives on his fishing boat for those shallow waters in the Westport River, in the Sakonnet River. And I'd never seen something like that wasn't a jet ski, with an engine that big.
Yeah, and that was really probably 8 or 9 months into the thinking on the project. So the first thing that we had done was we went and tried a few boats that we really admired the looks of. There was a boat that was now called Adequate that Rod Lucas still owns, has owned the boat for, I think, 60 years. He bought it from Bob. Bob had it, knew that it was that was originally the Goodyear family boat, and they built a bigger one. And so he remembers that Bob told him he had to buy it right then, and he got him to come up with $5,000 to buy it. He still has the boat to this day, and he's 96 years old.
That's right.
What goes out on.
Last summer. Yeah.
So we met Rod, and Rod took us out on Adequate. And then there was another boat that I think Bobby Rich built, or it may have been Chester Clements. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was Bobby Rich, called Frambois, that always stayed either over on Cranberry Island. And that was a really great looking boat. And these are boats that are, I think Adequate is 35 feet long and 8.5 feet wide. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a needle going through the water. So we had Spencer Lincoln draw a plan for a boat, and it just didn't look great enough. You know, it just kind of looked nice, but it didn't look anything different.
Well, because and back up a second, because he had done the 39 come 42 in the late 80s,
Right, that the Hinckley Company had built,
which,
done
you
a
know, was
lot of the
kind of
Duffy boats that were very successful.
Beginning of us
fishing
shifting over from the sailboats into the powerboat line, which
Right,
we got a lot of
exactly.
people
When the Hinckley
from the yachting
Company,
magazine, oh, you can't possibly do that, you know, this is a crazy thing, it never works, you know. It worked.
that's exactly right, Bob. That was really the beginning, was those Spencer Lincoln boats. So then, you know, Shep had, or maybe it was you, Bob, somebody mentioned that Bruce King was drawing great looking boats.
Well,
we,
I mean, yeah, well, we remember the designer we had before that did the 40,
Jim McCurdy.
Jim McCurdy passed away.
yeah,
So, we had to find somebody that had a good line. Both Shep and I like nice lines, to say the least. And so we hired him to do the 72 for us.
right.
So we had a good working relationship. And then Shep really did a great job of this 36 for
You
us.
hired Bruce King to do the 70.
70 first. So he
Yeah.
was on board. That was
Right.
our designer, basically. And
Yeah, I think y'all had to talk him into doing the small boat. He liked big boats and he liked big sailboats.
yeah, but when he designed the boat with a lot of good input from Shep and you and whatever, but I remember Bruce King coming. He said, "You know, that would make a hell of a good jet boat." And he said, "Jet boat?"
Yep.
But if you remember back then, the jet ski was the fastest growing part of boating.
Right.
We were selling those things like crazy. So, you know, you had the little boats here and the commercial boats over here. So the bell curve is the middle, which we had to say, let's go after it. And not knowing when we built that, how would we build 3 with the outdrive first? That you
No,
did?
we didn't build those first. We built the first one with a jet, actually. I think it was the 6th boat that we built. We built 2 outdrive boats.
Yes, remember that. Yeah.
One with a diesel engine in the same place as the jet, but a jack shaft running a dual counter rotating prop Volvo outdrive.
Yeah, right.
And then we built a second one with a gas engine in the back, which was the test boat, and an outdrive, which was the test boat, because we made a removable hardtop on it that was carbon fiber. And that's the one that what was his name? I'll think about it. I'll think of it in a minute. Flo Ortsman bought. He bought the boat after we'd started. And that boat is still in Northeast Harbor. Another guy that I've met still has it. I don't, you know, I'm sure Flo, but that was really a prototype for putting the engine all the way back and an outdrive and the removable hardtop. So it was sort of a sport looking boat. And that was about hull number 8, I think, or something like that. But you know, the whole project took on a life of its own. Once we went to the jet and realized the marketing advantages, I think of that. And Steve, you can kick in on this because you were there thinking about, you know, my memory's not at all perfect on that. other than all the salesmen thought this was a stupid idea to begin with, and they couldn't sell any of them.
Well, I think the boat had a nickname in the yard as Yo-Yo
Yeah,
Dasher, because it kept going in and out with all the gazillion changes that were happening every day, and the yard was just shaking their heads.
so the first few boats, that the Hinckley company, we built a splash mold for it, which was only supposed to be good for a few boats. And the jet was really, I think, for Bob and Shep pushed, or at least Shep pushed it. I think I love the idea of it because it doesn't catch lobster pots. You can run it up on the beach. It just has all kinds of things like that. And the boat was beautiful. But, I always remember that first boat, the Yo-Yo, which was called Dasher, when it was finally sold, we looked at the numbers and we'd sold it for $250,000 and we had about $600,000 in it. So as usual, we forged right ahead.
Just like I said.
Bob shook his head and said, we'll make it up on volume. But then all the first boats were progressions. The hull was changed very slightly after, I believe, hull 6. We found that the spray rail needed a little bit of adjustment, so they made a real mold. And made a few changes to it. And every boat got different and better. They changed the way the seating was in it, but I think the basic layout stayed pretty much the same. And it was a really tough sales thing at first. I think we sold the first boat, and then Bob, you'll remember this, wasn't it Dooney Edwards or somebody that bought 2 of them? One
Yeah,
to
Dooney did, yeah.
and one to stay up here. Keith Keneally bought one of the early ones.
Yeah.
So it seems like once the first 2 or 3 went, the floodgate opened, and pretty quickly, maybe 10 of them were sold.
Who sold the first boat? Was that you, Kaiser? Or was that you, Dad, or Halstead?
I think didn't
Dasher?
Dooney had 2 and 3, didn't he?
Pardon?
Who?
I think Dooney Edwards had 2 and 3, didn't he?
Did he?
Maybe
One
right.
that, one
I
that
didn't
went.
know he had that early, but he had one of the early ones. Yeah.
Well, I think he had the first couple, because one of them ended for Seal Harbor and the other was for
Chile.
his home, and there was pictures of it being taken over the mountains with an ox cart pulling this boat in an ox cart.
Yeah, that was in Chile.
Yeah, in Chile.
Chile, yeah.
I think Bob sold.
I can remember.
Yeah,
I can remember,
Dooney ended up being a pretty good friend.
I
He's
can
not
remember
with us
when
anymore.
we went to the Newport Boat Show the first year, everybody just, they were laughing at us, saying a 36-foot boat, water jet, you're calling it a picnic boat. And they just laughed at us. And to be honest with you, I thought we were a little overpriced at the time, because Bob, you may forget this, but I sat in a marketing meeting, and originally it was going to come to market at $175, and we went to the boat show at $250. And of course, I've eaten these shoes many times since, but I put my foot in my mouth. I'm not sure how far deep. And I said, "Oh, we can never sell them at this." And then, look what's ever happened. But it just
completely transformed the company.
Absolutely. But
But they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun to demonstrate, because you remember drive them wide open at 25 knots and pull it back in reverse. Bow would go down, water come up over the top of the
absolutely.
windshield.
Well, those first boats didn't have any fins on them either, so
No,
you
they
could
didn't.
spin them like a saucer. It was
That was
crazy.
really a design thing that we worked on a lot. I mean, we ended up
Tried all kinds of different fins.
and experimenting with, I'll bet, 40 different kinds and sizes of fins. We ended up, putting threads in the bottom of the boat so we could take them off in about 20 minutes and put them back on at Shep's dock with a dive suit on. And we went with all kinds of those, because we really decided that those early boats that could spin out so easily were probably a little dangerous.
They were dangerous, yeah.
But it sure took all the fun out of them when we got
You had to detune it a little bit, yeah.
But it also made it track a lot straighter, because the very first ones with no fins at all, you almost couldn't drive at low speed in a straight line.
No, you couldn't.
The fins really made that straighten out.
So did you remember any inflection points, Haywood, on the testing with the IOs versus the jet? Because it was as I recall, and I was young and not super involved in this part at that time, the jet was so radically different but exciting, and the lobster pot factor, and never, sailors, moving over. It seemed that the jet was such a no-brainer because it was so different. But
Well,
do you
from a
remember
marketing
any?
standpoint, that was true. The first one without the jet, Hinckley Company built the hull and the deck, but we built all the interior because we were going to try to do a really lightweight one. So we vacuum bagged the platform, bought an engine box top, but molded the rest at Bass Harbor Marine. A guy named John Horton, that later was an engineer for Hinckley, did that. He was very, very talented at that. And that boat, most of those boats weighed in the beginning 11,700 pounds, sometimes crept up to 12. We had a few that were maybe 11.3 that were pretty simple. And that boat weighed 10,000 pounds. So it didn't have the jet, which was heavy. And it had the Volvo engine, about the same horsepower as the Yanmar. But that boat was a good bit faster and tracked very straight. But you still had the props. I mean, you could tilt it up and clear it if you got a lobster pot. So it was a great handling boat, and it was probably, I think it was about 4 or 5 knots faster with the same horsepower. But that boat was light. But at the end of the day, the marketing advantages and the advantages for most people about not having to think about catching a lobster pot and being able just to pull it up on the beach and not worry about whether you're going to ding a prop or hit a rock. It was just a big advantage, even though the inboard outdrive boat probably would have been $30,000 cheaper.
And track better. I mean, I owned a classic for years. It's a pretty narrow boat, and it doesn't have the grip that you get with, obviously a prop. And so the tracking is a bit of an issue. It's certainly, but I think the trade-off, you're right. So I think that's a good segue to talk about, because I learned obviously with the bucket, with the manual buckets with the 2 levers, and there was never a problem with that because it was very manual, and it always went up and down. You didn't have anything to turn on. I mean, in fact, I crashed a picnic boat once because the early ones, I forgot to turn on the main breaker, but it stayed in gear. I just went away, and because the breaker wasn't on in those days with no electricity.
Right.
This was when we first had the jet stick. I was used to the lever, and I just thought it would operate like a lever, and it didn't because it wasn't on the main breaker, and the boat just kept going forward. And whereas the lever system was so fail safe, but then again, from a marketing point of view, I think the jet appealed to a wider audience and allowed neophytes to get into the boating business quite easily. Is that?
Yeah, the original arrangement with the levers, it really took some training. So we would train, there was 2 or 3 of us that would train people on them. And some people learned it in 2 hours, some people took 2 days, and some people decided to hire a captain. And it was, the problem was that the bucket lever, you had to have it right in the middle or it would creep backwards or creep forward. There was no detent. You had to be able to adjust it. So you had to get the boat into the dock, which all those boats, every single one of them came with a bow thruster. And that was the other wonderful part with the jet and the bow thrusters. You could walk it sideways in or out on the dock and keep it within an inch or 2 from going fore and aft. So that was
and with foot pedals, because the first ones had
right,
foot pedals, the bow thruster, right?
Bow thruster was on foot pedals, which were just switches from a windlass. But you could do that with your feet because you needed one hand on the wheel and one on the control for the bucket. So then we, I don't remember how many boats we were in. I'm sure it was 20 or 30. We knew that we needed to do something with that. And we ended up hiring a guy from Bangor, Maine that was, I can't remember his name, but I think he still does some of the repairs on the early ones because it was a completely,
I would fly up there to
Yep.
Bangor from Rhode Island and take a cab over to his little shack on the top of
Yep.
the hill there,
Yep.
right by the interchange of Route 3 and 195 or whatever it was, and he was in it, right? Yeah.
Yep. But it was typical of the whole development process in that we had the guy come down. He had done a bunch of stuff like that, and
Hey, Chris.
he said,
Oh, someone's got to mute. Yeah. Go ahead.
he said, you know,
Chris.
I could do this for $10,000 or $12,000.
Yeah, I did. Hang on a second.
Oh, John, I'm gonna mute you, John. Okay, John's muted. Go ahead, David.
So, you know, typical of the development costs on the boat, by the time we really had a working unit that we could sell, we had about $100,000 in the one that worked. And the first ones were made with a controller from a video game. That's who made a stick like that that was high enough quality, was these really high-end things that people played video games with. And of course, later the Hinckley company was able to find a source for better ones and ones that were more designed and more marine oriented. And of course, now the system is digital, not analog, but the first ones were a bunch of transistors and capacitors all soldered together. But at least you could go in and adjust those little pots in it to have a real neutral. So when you let go of the jet stick, it would be in neutral. It wasn't creeping forward or aft. And they were pretty dependable, I think. You know, they went through several iterations and then a lot of people upgraded, I think, when the final digital ones came out. And a lot of them, I think almost everybody that had one with the original control paid to have it upgraded to the jet stick when it came out. I'd be surprised if there are more than 5 of them out there that have the original controls.
I see them on the market now and again. I personally liked it quite a bit, and having had to, rebuild a few jet sticks over the years, they seem to get more expensive. These jet sticks as you go. They're the price of an automobile now. And they can't be finicky. I do like those old ones, but you're right. I think most people did upgrade because that kind of became market.
Yep. So, then other things got upgraded. They came up with a little bow locker for the anchor. The first anchors were out over the bow, and then they made it fold back in, which was a great upgrade, I think, for most people. But, I think, and Steve can comment on this, because again, I think there was some pushback when we were trying to get the whole thing off the ground. I think the marketing plan became, well, we got to get this thing out there. So we got the salesman to try to make some appointments. And I think I probably did the first few trips and took one all the way down the coast to Florida, would stop at yacht clubs where the salesman had gotten somebody they knew to come down to the dock and go take a ride. And I always remember pulling into Charleston one time on one of those trips, docking at the city marina. And for those of you who know that, there's a big bridge going across there. And about 20 minutes after I got there, some guy came down, running down on the dock and said, I want to know what that is. Is this one of the Hinckley boats? And he got all the information and he called back and bought one. That's when he saw it. It was down there, came over I think the next day and got a little ride. And so it was just so spectacular looking compared to what else was out there. That it obviously wasn't for everybody because the first ones were $250,000, $300,000. But it sure got a lot of attention on the waterway with people holding up the chart kit that brilliantly one of the salesmen, actually, I think Bob, I think you did that with Jim Owen, didn't you? To get that on the
He did. He worked with Jim Owen.
Yeah, so I left Hinckley Bass Harbor during the luxury tax when things were kind of tough, and then I did a deal to get Hinckley's on all the covers of all the chart kits.
Well, people would go by on the waterway and hold up the chart kit to you. We're going by in a jet boat and pointing at it. So it was really pretty cool.
Yeah, good. Steve, you got any great memories of training? Because you were dyed in the wool, Henry Hinckley's captain. Hinckley salesman, which seems to be the the progression of many of the early sales guys, coming off of, Halstead, coming off of a boat and coming onto land, and here, sell this. And of course,
Yeah.
dealing with sailors for all those years, which, all due respect to all the sailors on the calls, you sell a guy a sailboat, John Trainer, and they might need one more, but it'll take years for that transaction to happen versus, the personality that bought the picnic boat was quite different.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Sold both the sail and the power boats, and it was a whole different sales process for someone who was a prospective sailboat person as opposed to powerboat person. And I used to always say that if you could get a guy on a picnic boat in a good demo, and if he didn't buy it within a couple days after that demo, then you walked away because he wasn't going to buy it. A sailboat client, you would work them for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it took. But
Yeah.
Haywood's absolutely right. And I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but we got into doing these Hinckley events along the coast, and we would just say, okay, as Haywood mentioned, we'd go into Charleston and we'd send an email out to anybody who had ever inquired about a Hinckley boat, said, we're going to be on the dock from Saturday, Sunday, Monday, come on down, do demos. And again, I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but it was very good for sales. And but yeah, think it was a good run. Absolutely. Well, it still is.
And then it led to the 40, which I think today of the entire series of the classic, I think that 40 it absolutely nails the lines, in my opinion.
Still the
looking
prettiest
forward.
boat in the fleet. Absolutely.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
It's just everything, the proportions are absolutely perfect on that boat. I mean, as you know, modern Hinckley ownership has gotten away from Bruce King for
Yeah.
around anymore.
Pretty hard to beat Bruce King.
But
Yeah.
that boat is an amazing
But it's
progression.
thinking back on Haywood's telling the whole generation of the jet stick. I can remember with a couple owners calling me up, and just as Haywood said, if you didn't have that bucket control right in the middle section, it kept creeping. And there was a guy that he owned like old number 3 or something. I can't remember his name, down in Connecticut. And he loved the boat, but he went into the slip and he didn't quite have it in neutral. So the boat ran over and he was holding it off the piling, and it kept wanting to go because there was nobody else on board to put it in neutral. And he finally had to let go and hit the thing. And he said, I'll never drive this thing again, although he did. But, that the thing about the jet stick, I think back about it, it was so good because it let anybody be able to drive the boat. But it also, that was a negative, that anybody could drive that boat, because we would go out and do demos, and this guy would doing a demo driving along, and the guy goes, what's that green thing that went by? What's that red thing that went by? And you went, oh boy. They had no idea what buoys were or anything. So how about going to the power squadron before you take delivery and stuff? But
well, it expanded the market, that's for sure.
Yeah,
which was a good
thing. I mean, the jet stick turned it around. Absolutely, made things totally easy. Absolutely.
Bob, that Hinckley you had that you took Mary and I out in, was that a 40?
Oh God, John, I don't remember this.
Well, it was your boat, your personal boat.
Oh, no, it would have been a picnic boat, 36.
No, it was a picnic boat, but I was saying it wasn't
well, 44.
a 36.
I got a 44 later on.
Maybe it was a 44.
The 44.
You had a fly bridge.
Yeah,
I had a fly bridge.
That was a pretty comfortable boat.
Yeah, that was very nice.
Yeah, that turned out to be a big boat for one stateroom, though.
Yeah.
Right. It just never.
It was a big boat for one stateroom, and the sight lines, if you didn't have a bridge on it, weren't great. If you're in the waterway.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Unless you were really tall. For short people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
It had that blind spot. Yeah.
Yeah, it really had a blind spot on the bow if you weren't tall. So
well, you had the flying bridge on it, so
yeah, I did. Yeah, drove it from there all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think Hank has joined us. I think Uncle Hank's here, and I think Hank, you are about, and maybe this is where you could you have just picked up hull number 54, correct?
Right, right. Well, actually, I picked it up for someone else, but yeah.
And you're about.
It is
for
on its
anyone-
way here.
So this is Hank, Dad's brother, does these with us, and just joined. And you're about to tear apart hull number 54. Now, have you seen the boat yet?
Oh, yeah. I went down and did a pre-survey on it. And at that time, the current owner wanted it fixed up maybe for charter. And then when I gave him the number and he paled a bit, he decided to sell it. So anyway, so it now belongs to a fella from Oriental. And he's gonna put it back in shape.
So
It's tough shape. It's really tough.
And this boat was kind of in salvage kind of condition, but you're going to go through this boat soup to nuts. Has it got original everything? What's aboard this boat? Has it ever been redone, or are we talking original 1990? If hull number 54, you're probably talking 95, 45, and 6.
I thought it was earlier there, but it may be right in that area. Yeah, yeah. And well, it was a demo. It's Dancer or something. I can't remember now what the name of it is. No, it's one of the reindeer.
Dancer was one of
Yeah, and I believe the owner either passed away or something happened. It sat at the dock for years. And during that time, it had leaks and some windows and whatnot. So it's got some rot in the wood, and that's pretty bad. At some point, the engine was upgraded to the 420. And they put that in. They had originally 110-volt alternator in it, or an alternator setup, if you will. That was not reconnected when the engine was put in. And at this point, the jet's in tough shape. So the jet's been taken out and it's sitting in boxes, if you will, at the yard in the steward area. And so that's got to be redone. And anyway, so the engine itself doesn't look too bad. Wiring, hoses, possibly tanks. So I'm going to start taking it apart, find out what's there. And then I know the obvious cosmetics, the wood. She's going to be painted hull and deck. Hopefully we can upgrade the jet stick. It's got one of the early ones.
Does it have an early jet stick, or actually, I would have a jet
It
stick.
might be a generation 2.
Yeah,
That I
probably
don't
one.
know that as well. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of this. I got stuck
Yeah.
literally. But you all may know on that time frame what it's most likely to have.
They're
Hank,
probably
look,
analog if it's original. It's an
Pardon me?
analog, it's an analog one from that era. The original ones were all analog, and now, of course, they're all digital,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a pretty big upgrade.
Mhm.
Although the analog ones can be repaired
No,
and
that's true.
worked just fine.
Good. Well,
Hank, look hard at that jet because there's no parts for 291s anymore.
say again, please. I'm sorry.
I said, look very hard at that jet before you do anything because there's no more parts for 291 jets.
Yeah, I think that what we'll do is there's a guy in the West Coast that is rebuilding / modifying. And I think we may just do that, shift it to the new one. They're taking a military version
Okay.
and redoing that. And at any rate, I think what I might do is go out there and look at it first, though. I don't want to invest. The cost of the material is one thing, another to put the time in to get it in there and not have it perform. So go out and take a look at it.
Does this guy know what he's in for? I mean, you told me, I think today, about probably a year to rebuild it. So
I said 6 months to a year, because we don't know yet what we're getting into. Yeah, I think he does.
So the original sale price, right, of 250 might sound pretty cheap when you're done with a new jet. Like Haywood, I remember you doing some of the early testing on the Hamilton jet drive. Can you take us through some of the stuff you did in the testing before you decided to put that in?
Well, it was really just seeing, jets are, one of the things about them is they're not super efficient at low speed. The faster you go, the more efficient they are. Because part of that is just the ram effect of shoving water up in the bottom of it. The water's coming in fast and it's getting spun out by the impeller. So we looked at the Hamilton jets. I think there was a couple of other kinds that we looked at the time, which I don't remember. But I think pretty clearly, we went out on some other boats with some different jets on them. And the Hamilton jet seemed to be the best, but I don't remember the other kinds that we looked at.
Kamiwa, and then there was the.
Yeah, Kamiwa, that's exactly right.
And that cost us a fortune. That was a disaster.
Yeah.
Ultrajet was the other one.
What?
Ultrajet was the other one.
Yeah, I think it could have been. Yeah.
Who's that? Is that Pat?
Peter.
Oh, Peter.
You know, the other thing is that those boats all started out, the first boats had Yanmar 315s. And then Yanmar very quickly moved up to 350s, I believe. And so I think the Hinckley Company ended up with a lot of people took out 315s and went to 350s. And then, of course, they eventually went to 440s, which fit right in the same space. Wasn't a great engine. I mean,
Swallowed valves.
a lot of
That was another expensive adventure.
Yeah. But so, you know, the engines were different. And I don't remember if there was, I think I think all of them had Yanmars in the early days, except there was 2 boats built with gas engines. One that was a jet with a gas engine that went out to a lake in Arkansas. I think the people couldn't get diesel out there, so they had it built with a gasoline engine. And then the one that was called Decision, that was Flo Oarsman's, that was in Northeast, still is in Northeast Harbor. And he just wanted a gas engine because it was quiet. It was even quieter than the sound, all the sound work that we did on the diesel.
Was there the outdrive? Was there a Volvo in the mix somewhere in there?
There was one Volvo engine.
Yeah.
Was the very first outdrive boat, which was red at the time. And I think that was hull number 6, I believe. And that was the one that we did the custom platform that was all vacuum bagged in. That was a very lightweight boat. That was a Volvo, and the other 2 were, I believe, Mercruisers, because that's what matched up with the gas engine. Wasn't as good an outdrive as the Volvo. The Volvo was a dual counter-rotating prop. I think the Mercuries were too, but they weren't as tough as the Volvo outdrive. They were more troublesome.
I did redid one of the 40s with the IPS drive and Volvos in it back some time ago. That was an interesting experiment, but a mighty expensive boat if you hit bottom.
Yeah. I didn't realize, I mean, those were obviously the newer designs that were built. I didn't even know any of those that were built with IPSs, but I'm behind the time.
Well, this was a yacht tender, and apparently came loose on the way to Europe. When it was being towed rather than lugged aboard, and the owner decided to dump it. The price was incredible. An attorney from Boston who worked with the distributor up there with the Volvo distributor convinced Volvo to let me modify it. I guess they were playing with it at that point in time. But at any rate, we did it under their supervision, and you know, it was a different performance. It came out of the hole faster and so on and so forth. But it had those forward-facing counter-rotating props down there, and all you had to do was tweak them a little, and the bill went right through the roof.
Yep.
I thought the owner actually was going to total that thing on the test drive. We took it to Nantucket, and first thing he did is started driving right straight across the shallow sandbar. I'm holding my breath waiting. But we did.
Drives off.
Yep.
I think Volvo's the only person making IPS drives now, aren't they?
To the best of my knowledge, that's correct.
The other company that was making had so much trouble that got sued so many times. I think they are gone.
Yeah.
Well, it was a real breakout move for Hinckley. I mean, it was obviously coming during it, and then, you know, I guess emerging from a very difficult time with the luxury tax. And well, I mean, sailors were cheap before you told them you were going to tax them 10% on getting a boat.
Right.
Right? And that really made the sailors pucker up, that luxury tax. And I think which was a big motivation to get into the really go hard at it. And it was a breakout play, and I think the purchasers of Hinckley in 97, 98 really benefited from a lot of the work you guys did. But is there anything you Steve or Dad or Haywood want to add about the development of that whole project before it? And Haywood, do you have anything you want to add, Steve?
Well, it totally transformed the company, obviously. I mean, we used to build, Bob, 4, 5, 6 sailboats a year, and then all of a sudden we're building, I'm not sure how many picnic boats a year back then, but
Well,
it's
the
just-
original sales goal was 4 or 5 a year
Of the picnic boat.
of the picnic boat. When we kind of said, if we could sell 5 of them a year, that'll start paying back the cost. And
yeah,
so obviously that got blown right out of the water.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it obviously, Bob can speak to it, it's totally transformed the company. I mean, in the old days, I'm not sure how many holes we had in a sailboat. You build the tooling, it took, I'm not sure how many boats to pay off the tooling in a sailboat. And then when we got to the power boats, they just were clicking, and you could, like new would sell, just you'd come out with a new model here and there, and just it kept going. So but fortunately, Bob had me in the right place at the right time, so it was definitely a good ride.
It was nice to have that volume, because the old days you'd build a couple B40s and pull the molds outside and then get all beat up. Picnic boat, it stayed right in there, just one a week or whatever. Just wax it again and knock another one out.
My initials are great.
It was about 10, you had to build 10 boats roughly to pay for the tooling, to get half even,
Like a really nice tides, and look at the skin under here. You peel this back.
Well, I gotta mute someone.
Got like all the intricate. Yeah, it's got car.
There you go. No, I had to mute you. Yeah, I mean it's a little easier to run a business when you've got a little more volume,
Yeah.
certainly the boat business.
Yeah. Great.
I was
having
remembering it.
orders.
And it was a whole, as I mentioned earlier, it was a whole different sales process. I mean, if with a powerboat guy, he would buy the boat, you on. And if he wasn't going to buy it, you went to somebody new. Where in a sailboat, I love selling sailboats because it was more of come to the yard and we'll build a sailboat and you can play boatyard. But with the powerboats, it changed different. But it was just a whole different selling process, which allowed us to sell a lot more boats and ramp up the production.
Well, I think it also made it easier to keep the guys in the family, because you could resell their boat quicker, right? And you could move them up to a 40, right? And up the food chain, because their boat wouldn't, I mean, remember when the sailor would want to have a 42 and they'd want to go to a 51, but they have to sell the 42 first. That could take a year to happen, versus you could move a picnic boat if the market was in good shape in maybe 3-4 months.
Yeah, and back in the heyday, I could look a client in the eye and say, you buy this boat and you want to move up to a different product in 2 years, I'll sell it for more than what you bought it for. I mean, it really went well for a long time like that.
Well, the whole
Do
pricing,
you remember in the
back then,
beginning?
which was probably the first time that y'all were able to do it, was you were building enough boats in a year that we started pricing every hull. I think it was $3,000 more than the one before it, because we knew the costs were going up and we were adding things.
Yep.
And that was pretty good. Fresh, allow you to say to somebody, look, take this one because the next one's going to be $3,000 more, and the next one's going to be $3,000 more than that.
Absolutely. Yep.
True.
Well,
And
good.
I still get the stories. Matter of fact, it happened to me a week ago, and I haven't been selling boats for years, but I sold a boat to Martha Stewart, and everybody still has these stories that Martha Stewart bought a boat and we moved her right up in the line so she didn't have to wait for all the other boats. And then this guy will say, yeah, and she bought somebody else's position so that and never paid him for it. And you still have those stories about that. And I was at my wife's class reunion, and somebody came up and told me the story. I said, no, that's not true. That's not true. She stood in line like everybody else. And exactly right, Haywood, because it did motivate people to move when we had the price going up every hull.
Well, Martha still has that boat called Skylands 2, which is named
Yep.
after her house, which is the old Ford estate. But
Yep.
Dad, you tell a story about when she brought in an egg.
Oh, that shape with the color of the hull.
Yeah.
We had to match the egg of one of our chickens, right?
And that was a cholesterol-free chicken.
Well, you
a
sold it
chicken
to
that
her.
laid cholesterol-free eggs.
So it's a cholesterol-free paint job.
But I will say, just another sidelight here is that, talking about Martha for a second, is that she had signed up and everything, and then I got this call from Martha Stewart Living Production Company, and they said, "Oh, we'd like to film it." Well, unfortunately, the boat was already in production, and the first thing I thought, how stupid can it be? But the first thing they said, "We want to film the whole building of it," and the first thing I thought was, that's just going to slow us down. What do we do? We can't let them do it. And then I don't know, somebody hit me with the head with a baseball bat or something. I said, "Yo, great." And so she did a whole half-hour show on that Martha Stewart Living. And when we'd go into the office on a Monday, we could see where that show ran over the weekend, because there would be a gazillion calls from Minneapolis, because Minneapolis ran the Martha Stewart show. And so it was a great, she did a lot of marketing for us and did not get paid for it. So it was great.
Yeah, I saw the boat was in front of the yard last summer.
Yeah.
The same routine. She stores it there and takes it over to Seal Harbor where it lives. And
although I will say, to be very honest, that her boat originally did not have a jet stick. And after all of the Martha Stewart marketing shows, we ended up giving her a jet stick for that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And I did drive her when she was in the slammer for illegal trading. I drove, she had that show, Martha Stewart, it was Mr. Trump's apprentice. She had one, and she was in the slammer when she was doing one. And so I had to take out the winner of her show out on her picnic boat with her daughter, because she wasn't available. She was locked up.
all right. Well, anyone have any questions from the audience before we kind of creep it up here on our 1 hour mark? Any questions for Haywood or Dad or Steve or Hank or anyone on the development or manufacturer? I think we're gonna. You raise your hand. I don't have, or speak up if you want, because we don't have a huge audience tonight.
Randy there's got a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm on my second Hinckley powerboat. I have a 55.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in Miami. And certain times of the spring and early summer, the seaweed around here is really bad. And you can run across a big patch of seaweed at 30 knots, and you got to stop and clear the jets. And when I'm going to the Bahamas, 200 miles to the out islands, it's a real pain in the neck. Do you all have any solution for me?
So you're talking about those big patches of Sargasso, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you say you clean the jets, do you have to go down and open the ports and?
No. I just have to come to a stop.
Yeah.
No. Keep the buckets up and put the engines in reverse, at 1,000 RPM for 15 seconds, and then I'm on my way. But I have to, I got to do it a zillion times when the seaweed's bad.
There's nothing to be done for it.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I brought a 48 up last year, and the amount of seaweed that was off of the Florida coast was just unspeakable. I ended up having to stop. At one point, I was just completely bogged down even, but I was like 5 miles from Stewart and tried one last time to flush it again. I couldn't even make more than like 14 knots. I flushed it one last time, and whatever happened, it cleared it that last time. But there was blankets of it out there. They're not islands. They're blankets in some places. You can't avoid it.
Yeah, I know. Well, anyway, I love my boat. It's my second one.
That's one of the downsides of that jet. It's it frees you up. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Maine lately, but you could walk across the lobster traps. There's so many up there.
Yeah, I know. I've been up there.
So you don't have that issue up there, but you do have the sargasso weed issue down here, which but there's no.
Exactly. It's becoming more of a problem here in Maine now. It's big. You can see the islands, like when you're on Cape Air, you can see the islands of seaweed down there.
Huh.
I would think you'd have the same problem with IPS drives or anything when you get those huge mats of them.
Mhm.
Even props you end up slowing down and backing up to get them off of it.
Well, and also
Really?
keep in mind that sargasso weed catches a lot of floats them like wood and other things that you hit and you can destroy props with. So I don't know. You run through that stuff with props.
You're
You
still
know,
with the
you're
jet.
not going to do any damage to the jet, really, but it
True.
is inconvenient.
Yeah, not a big deal.
All right. Well, I think that's I think we're about good. Unless anyone else has any other questions, we'll let people get to dinner time since we're creeping up on 7. And we're gonna do another one of these. Hank, I told you, and Kaiser, I told you as well. I haven't told you, Dad,
Yeah.
but we're gonna do one of these on Henry Hinckley stories.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh,
We'll have to drink a lot that night.
Yeah.
Aren't we gonna do one on Bob Hinckley stories?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
I'll
do it.
watch it later on afterwards on
Hey,
TV.
Barry, let's
Hey,
see your
Chris.
dad.
What's that?
Let's see your dad.
Oh, he's right here.
I
Hang on
know, I
just a
can't
second.
see him.
Right,
What
you
did you
can't
tell me?
Yeah,
It's
move
a
your laptop.
story of my life.
see it.
What'd you
Right here.
say?
He's not showing up.
The other people are
Wait a
just
minute,
blocking
there
him
he
out
is.
on your screen.
Let me move this thing.
Can you see him?
Yes, I'm here. Just
Everyone can
Oh,
see
now
Dad.
I see him. Okay, now I see. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, he's here.
Probably the last time you'll see me.
I think you got a couple more weeks in you.
Maybe.
How old is he?
88.
All right.
88, 89
Old
in
enough to
August.
know better.
Damn right. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a long life.
Yeah. All right, guys.
right.
It's
All
great.
Stanton.
Great catching up. with you.
Steve.
Yeah, great catching up with
All
all
right.
you guys. Great
Yeah.
seeing you. We'll see you in
See
a
y'all
couple
later.
of weeks.
Good work,
See
man.
ya.
All right. Bye-bye,
Thanks
guys.
for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah, it's fun. All right. Bye-bye.
okay, Bob, Barry.
Yeah.